Hello everybody and welcome to Monza. It is the 12 hours here and the first time the Hankook 24-hour series has been to this classic Italian circuit right in the middle of Lombardy. Great to be here with a relatively full paddock as well with the Formula Renault Euro Series. 1922 was when this circuit was first brought into being just the third purpose-built track to be built in the world. It's been here since the very start of the motor racing around the world. We've got two qualifying sessions for you this morning, 30 minutes apiece, TCE first and then the GT cars. And we'll bring it all to you live in sound and vision. John Hindhaugh and Johnny Palmer with you this morning. So let's first of all have a look at the 3.6 miles of the circuit and where we fit it into the calendar of 2020. We started off in Dubai in the UAE for a rain-shortened event for the Dubai 24 hours in January. We've already had our first European race. Well done to Creventic. They managed to be the first series to have an international race in Europe, and it was a full 24 hours mixed class endurance event at the Circuit of the Algarve, just up the coast from Portimao. That was in the middle of June, what should have been Le Mans weekend, of course. Well, we managed to get 24 hours in down there, fully socially distanced. We've now moved into Italy and to Monza, 3.6 miles with the old oval circuit still being able to be seen, and the cars were out on that for a demonstration run and a parade lap yesterday evening. 5.8 kilometres, 3.6 miles. From Monza, the 24-hour series will move on and head to Barcelona, famed as a Formula One test track and venue, for the 24 hours of Barcelona, the first weekend of September. Always a very, very spectacular and popular event, and I suspect it will be even more important this year. Back to Italy in early October, the 9th and 10th, for Imola. What a beautiful circuit. Anti-clockwise track makes it a little bit unusual, and nobody does shabby chic like the Italians, particularly at Imola. Beautiful place to go. Then it's Zandvoort, an addition. Weren't sure whether they'd be able to get there this year, but with no Formula One Grand Prix, the noisy days are available, and that will be on the new Grand Prix iteration of the circuit, with the big banked turn coming on to the front straight. That's how the season pans out. We're at Monza now, the second round of the Championship, the European Championship, if you will, the Championship of the Continents at Barcelona and Zandvoort to make that series work. So, Johnny, a very lovely calendar that's been put together by Creventic, and last few bits and pieces of polishing and putting the decals on going down in the pit lane. But I think in common with most series, they've had to adapt and they've had to be pretty clever and pretty pragmatic about what they're going to do. No flyaway race to the States this year in the Championship of the Continents, which is why both Barcelona and Zandvoort are in there. But you've got to say that's a pretty impressive calendar and takes in some fabulous circuits, like here for the first time.
I have to say, if you didn't know the background of this year, health-wise globally, you'd actually look at that and think, fabulous calendar, and there's been no issue with it up until that point now. The fact that we're into, I think, sort of version 7 or 8, sadly. But, you know, that's fine, because by the end of the season, we're going to look back and say we had 5 cracking European races. Dubai, I know that, that just didn't go too well for...
It was the portent of doom as far as 2020 was concerned, wasn't it?
But again, uncontrollable circumstances, and you know, we had to just make the best of the situation where the heavens opened partway into the race and we couldn't continue it. But let's hope we don't get another Dubai like that again, and we'll be back there in the new year. And then, you know, as things stabilise from the latest crisis, still this championship looks very healthy. I'm sure there is another flyaway race booked or intended to happen in 2021. It'd be great to go back to COTA in November in a year's time. And yeah, sort of picking up the pieces, they've done an incredibly good job. And the milestone events within the calendar, like the Barcelona 24 Hours, which for many, many years ran as a touring car race, it's now GTs as well. That's there in its regular position at the first weekend of September. 2 visits in 1 year to Italy. You're never going to hear me complaining about that.
No.
And how good is it to be going back to Creventic's homeland, as you've just said, Zandvoort, which I don't think we visited since season 2016.
And were you there for that? Did you go to that one?
I've been to that race. I'm not sure whether I went to the last visit. I think I was, actually, yeah.
Yeah, I've been there and I loved it. I loved it. I didn't like climbing the ladder to the top of the old commentary box. I think that has been improved a bit, as has the whole circuit. The whole character of Zandvoort has been changed a little bit because of the quick turn onto the front straight. Although this is still the quickest circuit here at Monza that these cars in the Hankook 24-hour series will visit. I was just looking at some of the average speeds in that last practice session this morning, Johnny, a hair away from 190 kilometre an hour average, which, you know, that is not hanging around. That's getting on for 130 mile an hour average for the GT cars, mind you. That's using both the chicanes. The Bugatti Shoes Refueling is the first one, and then up to the Variante della Roggia, the second chicane. Ascari's always there now. Of course, there is no opt out of that one. But you can miss out, and I have seen testing, high-speed testing here at Monza. Audi used to do it for their GT3s, and back in the day, the LMP1s. They took out the first chicane and would run flat out.
Yeah, the 919 Evo did some laps, didn't it, minus the first chicane as well?
Yeah, absolutely. But we have got the Refueling Bugatti Shoes sponsorship on there this weekend. So out at the moment, all bar one of the GTE cars, the 188 is in the pit. It has in fact just come back into the pit lane, and that was taken out by Mathieu Detré, AC Motorsport. Always worth keeping an eye on them. 101 going across the line is the bright orange Jordan's Red Camel .NL car. Didn't have the best of practice sessions earlier on. Really get to the bottom of why that car hadn't turned very many laps. May just be that they felt they'd done enough work yesterday. A small but perfectly formed entry again, JP, with 10 TCE cars, and a bit of a problem a moment or two ago for Top Car Sport and Loris Kratis, just locking up the front Hankooks going into the Della Roggia chicane, but he kept it on the island and between the white lines, just about, and has continued in that red, white and green machine. KCMG here with us this weekend. They've got a busy weekend as well, with 2 Porsches in the NLS this weekend as they begin their preparation for the Nürburgring 24-hour race later in the year. 2 races, as I said, this weekend. And the Honda then just heading out of the pit lane for the Brutal Fish by KCMG entered car, and Daniel Lloyd taking out the 122. Good to see that FK7 TCR Honda bringing a little more variety. We have got Cupra, Volkswagen and Audi in the TCR category. We have got a couple of TCX, 3 TCX entries, including WEC Motorsport's BMW E46 M3, venerable old touring car. Fantastic to see that car out. And interestingly for me, Nordschleifer Racing, we've seen the Ligier GS2R before, Johnny. Good to have it out again. They had some issues yesterday, but turned a respectable 24 laps this morning in the previous practice session. The other TCX is a Seat Leon Cup car, one of the early cars, one of the cars running DSG for Autorama, the 211. Haven't seen that car out yet. But the Ligier, we saw Barcelona last year, was it?
Could have been. Yeah, that's the car that is from a one-make championship. Is that right?
Yeah, but they're also selling it as they were doing some development work, and they kept. I think they had a couple at Barcelona, and they kept having issues and fixing them and sending them back out again. Proper development run.
Absolutely.
Very pretty looking car. Not the cheapest car to buy, but we hear from those who know that it is a fairly sensible car in terms of its running costs. Purpose designed GT stroke TC car. Remember, there's two separate races here, one for the full GT field and the other for the what's called the touring car field. The way that things are divided between them, perhaps not always looking obvious, so you would sort of think that Ligier TCX was a GT car, but it's all about performance, BHP per kilogram, and lots of very other clever bits and pieces of arithmetical calculations. Spin for the 175 early on. That's the Baz Coton car. Baz Coton, and it's Keith Besson behind the wheel of that Cupra, and he's looped that at the Refueling at the first corner. They weren't at Portimao, of course, so it's their first outing in Europe this year. Maybe just knocking a bit of the rust and the cobwebs off.
I'm sure plenty of people are doing that up and down the field. I've managed to dig out the result from Barcelona last year. You're quite right, Nordschleifer Racing turning up with a Ligier for Guillaume Romain, Mathieu Santis, Ducellier and Poisson. They actually won their class, but that's because they're the only car in SP4 at the time, and it's not entered as SP4, as John's probably mentioned already, TCX. So joining that car in the TCX category, the Autorama Motorsport Seat Leon Cup Racer V1, and there's also BMW E46 on my entry list.
Correct.
Is that okay? That's still a going concern.
Yeah, and that has been out, the WEC Motorsport car. George Haynes already out on that. The one we haven't seen is the second Autorama car, the 211 Seat Leon early car. Hello to Josh Barrett at RSL_studio, by the way, if you want to get in touch. Josh, as you probably know, a very active member of the collective, and he's up at Donington Park this weekend. He's doing his prep for that. It's the MG Car Club event, a historic 3-hour relay and a 40-car Mini 7 grid, and they'll be 40 wide going down the Craner curves as well. I once remember spannering for Martin Haven when he ran a Mini 7 many years ago. We just got back in the early hours of the morning from a holiday in Goa in India, and literally put the car on the trailer and drove straight to Silverstone. And it was the old Silverstone in those days, and I remember them coming 4, 5 and 6 wide through the old bridge. Yeah,
that requirement to be a metre apart is straight out the window when it comes to Mini 7s.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No social distancing whatsoever for the first corner, and in fact for pretty much the whole race.
Yeah. Good luck at the weekend, Josh, and everybody who's going racing wherever you are around the world. Seems everybody's getting back to some racing, thanks to all the ladies and gentlemen in orange in Europe or in white in the US. I know VIR have got a big meeting, Virginia International Raceway this weekend. If you're going out to Marshall, thank you very much indeed. Please stay safe and respect the recommendations and your fellow workers or competitors. News breaking, and whilst we're talking about Italian tracks, we've been trailing this on Midweek Motorsport for a little while. Tim Gray, well ahead of the curve here, suggested this a while ago, was poo-pooed in some quarters. Mugello added to the Formula One calendar.
Ooh,
that is going to be... I've got goosebumps thinking about that. James Collado sent me an onboard video of him driving the 2009 Ferrari round there on a test day, albeit in the current colour scheme, and he was doing 128s without any bother at all, and the chicanes are third and fourth gear.
Wow.
There is, as Joe Bradley said, they're S's, they aren't chicanes.
No.
Absolutely extraordinary stuff. It's on Johnny Palmer's birthday weekend to F1 at Mugello. Happy, very happy, as he finishes off his cappuccino this morning.
It's a good job there won't be a crowd, because it's a right old struggle to get in and out of there.
I don't think you could have Formula One with a crowd.
I don't think you could. No.
Just for the logistics
of
getting in and
MotoGP
out.
have managed it for many, many years.
A lot of people come on bikes to watch MotoGP. Easier to filter people through.
Yeah. True enough. Yeah. The routes in and out of there are designed for bikes, and not for cars.
Route.
Single route, yeah.
You can come
single
from
track road.
Two ways on the single track road, and one of them I don't even know how they get the trucks down, because it looks, the first time I went there, which was only last year, by the way, Nordschleifer Racing 226, the very lovely red, white and black Ligier into the pit lane and out again. As we were turning into it in the Ford Focus ST estate car, didn't we, that we picked up at the airport? As we were turning into it, I was convinced I was being given duff information and that we were turning into somebody's backyard. It looked ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I thought, there's no way they get trucks down here. And then when you get in, there's that lovely big opening in Michelle, which is huge and wide like a toll plaza. But the fact is, it's a single track road either side of it. It's going to be magnificent. So when's that? When's your birthday, JP? Just remind everybody.
11th of September.
Ooh.
So, yeah, I don't know what day that falls on this year. Either a Friday, Saturday or Sunday, I'm guessing. So looking forward to that. Shame I can't be there. But
I'm sure they'd let you in for your birthday.
well, yeah.
That's Chase Carey.
I'll take my driving license or passport for proof. But yeah, why not? It might well be a one-off as well. I'm sure it probably is. So yeah, I want to savour, definitely.
Now, and that could well be a significant milestone for Ferrari as well, couldn't it? Isn't that their 1000th Grand Prix? They were talking about that being the 1000th Grand Prix. Tim Gray will get onto that. And that is a track that they use, as well as the Fiorano test track that Ferrari built many years ago. I think Ferrari still own Mugello. Certainly have a stake in it.
Okay.
I'll be guided by Tim Gray on our production chat for that. I'll see something pop up in a moment. Konstantin Kledza for Volkswagen 112. That is the third place car for Autorama at the moment. Still haven't seen their other car, as Brutal Fish by KCMG in the FK7 Honda Civic and Daniel Lloyd go to the top with a 2 minutes 2.029. So you heard it here at F1 at Mugello. Hello to Phil Kinch. Hello, Phil. Down in Northampton. Great to see the Brutal Fish KCMG car this weekend. Perfect warm-up for the team's three-pronged attack on TCR Europe, and a great livery as well. Phil, I hope you're well. Hopefully see you at the track soon as well. At RSL_studio, please, if you'd like to get in touch with us. And always nice to hear from you. We'll be keeping an eye on the old Twitterage as the weekend goes through. Qualifying here for TCR, then for GT, then we've got the Formula Renault Euro Series race, then we've got the first 4 hours of the Monza 12, and then tomorrow another Formula Renault Euro Series, and then the remaining 8 hours. So really, you know, no time for us to get in any bother, Johnny, is there really?
Certainly not, no. No, it's going to be flat out a couple of days, but it is most welcome after a relatively quiet period. Took me a little while to adjust to the 7 o'clock alarm call this morning, but well, no change there. Many people will say, frankly. Yeah, even if I'd had a week full of those, I still wouldn't be used to it.
I can't.
But,
I could never get used to early shifts. You've done breakfast shows, plenty of
have.
time in. I've done breakfast shows, I've done late shows and not got back till 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning. I never got used to getting up half an hour before it felt like you went to bed. Because I couldn't go to bed early on the night time. I never felt that was right. A lot of people would go to bed at 9, 8 o'clock sometimes, and then get up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Couldn't do it.
No.
Could never do that.
No, you're kissing the whole night away. That's
exactly.
Don't like doing that. But it did help knowing that, you know, got some proper motorsport to look forward to throughout today and tomorrow. And it's just great to be back. I mean, you know, esports has taken the motorsport world on fire.
And continues to do so. They've got the 24 hours of Spa this weekend, which Ben and Nick are looking after for us, the VCOs.
Right, but for me, you know, there's still just something that little bit extra special about real cars going around a real circuit, and of course you and I have covered the virtual version of this race.
Which went into the dark.
It did, yeah. I know. Enhanced lighting effects, which ran to the exact time that it should have been going dark, and also the weather as well was adjusted accordingly. But we don't need any of those physics engines for this weekend, because it's all there in front of us as nature intended.
Looks great.
It does.
The park at Monza, doesn't it? Really looks lovely today. Slightly long shadows still. What is it? 11:15 Central European summertime. What date are we today? 10th today. So sunset tonight, not until just after 9 local time. So 15 hours of daylight today. 15 and a half. Sunrise tomorrow morning, 5:45. So no suggestion of any lighting being required over the next couple of days. We'll be finished by about 7:30 local time tomorrow, which will give us time to nip out and have dinner and enjoy our Saturday evenings. Don't forget, we've got full coverage for you across the weekend, sound and vision, and enhanced timing as well. Thanks to James for the strategy timing, available at radio-show.co.uk on the Monza 12-hour page. I think we've got to begin. Yes, now I've got it on the screen. Thank you to our timers. Not starting the Autorama Motorsport, so that there will be just the 9 TCE category runners, split between 6 TCRs and 7 TCRs and 2 TCXs. That has now, it's greyed out on the screen, which I know from our iRacing means we're not going to see it. So 1-2-2, still leading is the Brutal Fish by KCMG Daniel Lloyd driven Honda. In fact, that's just come back into the pit lane in its distinctive KCMG colours, the black, white and mid-blue. And the Porsches, by the way, that are running in the Nürburgring this weekend in a similar colour scheme. I've not seen a Porsche in the full KCMG colours before, and they look absolutely outstanding.
There is something quite special about that KCMG livery, though, and it does tend to lend itself to anything it's applied to. But I haven't seen the pictures of those Porsches yet, but I can sort of imagine it and how, you know, the livery, the wrap is applied to this particular Honda. Well used to it being on the big Nissan GTRs,
yes,
of course. But yeah, KCMG on a Porsche, would like to see that. And in action this weekend on what is a busy weekend motorsport-wise, with NLS in action as well.
Slightly different from the... There's
yes,
a bit more white on the Porsches. One of them's got blue and one of them's got red as accents on the mirrors and on the front end of the car. So Snowy and Bruce Jones should be able to tell them apart. But they've really gone to town with that livery, the KCMG on that car. And it's not identical. And you mentioned this, JP, and you're right. It's never been exactly the same on any of their cars, but the constituent parts in terms of the colourway have been the same. And I think it's nice the way they've adapted it to the angular Nissan GTR, quite an angular shape for the FK7 Honda as well. The Porsche's got more curves, so that they've worked with the curves of the Porsche on that, but it's still absolutely recognisably KCMG. Yeah, and
that's, you know, every credit to the livery designer who's taken the KCMG cues, if you like, and then fitting it to the car in question. I have seen it done in the past where a livery is just directly transposed from one car to the other, and it kind of doesn't work really. So yeah, use the new shape and its strengths.
And by the way, the 18 car, which is the blue trimmed car, and you'll hear Bruce and Snowy talking about this one at the weekend. Patrick Pilet, Ricard Leitz, and double 24-hour Le Mans winner overall, Romain Dumas. In the other car, you've got the 19, that's Alex Imperatori, and he's, I think, done half a dozen Nürburgring 24 hours. Josh Burden from Australia and Eduardo Liberati, both names that we've commentated on in the past. So two very strong lineups for KCMG. They'll be racing at the weekend. That's Saturday and Sunday, the first time that the what we used to be called VLN, Nürburgring Langstrecke Series, has raced on 2 consecutive days at Nürburgring. Inside the last 9 minutes, and still the KCMG Honda leading from Luke Breukers, who's popped up into second place for Red Camel Jordans.nl. Top 2 in the pitch, JP.
Yeah, hearing murmurs that it could actually be Evo in that car, despite it saying Luke on the screen.
Oh, yeah, well, it's just dropped down to 3rd position as the AC Motorsport black and white car's gone through into second with Mathieu Detré.
Trying to get that confirmed. I might have to wait till the end of the session to be fully confirmed. But yeah, the times are still good from the 101 car in 3rd position. The number 1 Golf, which is currently doing a lap through the first of the Lesmos, looking to try and find a bit of time. Italian driver at the wheel. It's looking like a very Italian-type Golf, that actually, despite Autorama Motorsport by Wolf Power being Swiss. It's Roberto Ferri who is trying to set a good time here. Not yet up in the first sector, though. Last lap around must have been an outlap because it was nearly 4 minutes.
That is an addition, that green. Autorama don't normally have the green. It's normally just the Swiss red and white with a bit of grey on it, but there's a green flash down the side and green on the roof, on the rear spoiler, almost has what looks to be an Italian flag, unless that's just what I'm seeing through it to the roof. Yes, it might be, but there's green flashes. There are green flashes on the bonnet of that car as well. Ferry coming around the Parabolica at the southern end of the racetrack as the JS2 Ligier goes across the line. That looks a bit more swoopy than the last time we saw it. I don't know whether there's been any detailed changes around the back end. Maybe a slightly different rear spoiler on that, and the rear end just looking a little bit cleaner. It might just be the colour scheme, if I'm honest, but the rear light clusters look a little bit different from the last time that we saw it. It's a very elegant sports stroke GT car with its faired-in headlights, rather reminding me of a 550 Ferrari, particularly in that red colour. And then in the middle section and towards the back, there's swoopy lines, which look very impressive indeed. The big swoosh on the side working very well with the shape of that car. And that's the Team Nordschleifer Racing. John Boris Shire behind the wheel of that car. Leading TCX at the moment and 6th overall. Just half a second, by the way, between 1st and 2nd, and another 2/10 back to the 101 in 3rd. Then half a second back to Autorama Yannick Metzler in the 112. Top car, Loris Prates in the Cupra. He's another 4/10 back. 2/10 back to the Ligier GS2R in 6th position.
I'm just getting another revised entry list through.
Oof.
I think the first revision was just because it included the drivers that were eligible for qualifying.
Got you.
And this one is topped. It just says entry list number 2, drivers allowed to start. We haven't yet had qualifying for the GT series. That's next.
Yeah, but
in about 10 minutes' time.
We have got 3 Herbert cars on the list, 91, 92 and 93. Some discussion about how the Renaults will be split up between those 3 cars, and we yet to see. Remember, it was the 92, somewhat shockingly, that won the 24 Hours of Portimao after gearbox issues on the 91, most uncharacteristic from a Porsche RS. The engine you can hear in the background is the tortured 4-cylinder from the Golf number 112, being given a good caning by Yannick Metzler. He's coming through the second part of the Lesmos now and into that curving straight really underneath the old banking. It has got a name, the Curva del Seraglio, but effectively it's just a slight curve in the road and you barely even apex it, to be honest. Try and put as little lock on the car as you can so you're not scrubbing off the wheels. Looks like Daniel Lloyd might be going back out again in the 122 KCMG, the current provisional pole sitter. FK7 Honda TCR. Through goes the 188 past the start-finish line. That's Mathieu Detré. And he's just put in his best final sector. So is he winding up to something exciting here in the black and white number 188 through the Refueling?
Going to be fascinating to see how the Belgian gets on. Running a little bit short of time now. Could get this lap and one more in, Mathieu Detry. So let's see how he gets on. But turning up the width towards the end of the lap in his AC Motorsport Audi RS3. And a familiar paint scheme now for the AC crew. That the white wings and the black central body stripe that runs down the bonnet, and then the black roof and principally black sides as well. Looks very stealth-like, particularly when we get to the later hours and darkness begins to descend. It's not going to get as dark as the virtual race did, because of course that was run as a full 12 hours. Can't do that here at Monza because of noise restrictions. So 4 hours today and then the 8 hours tomorrow, meaning it's a full day's racing on Saturday.
That's another paint scheme, isn't it, the AC guys, that you get used to seeing, whether it was in the virtual preventing events, which will carry on through the season as well, or in the real world, that black and white colourway, and you look at that and you go, right, oh yeah, that's AC. And it actually has the AC. If you look very carefully when you side onto the car, AC has got a big, almost an oval formed by the A and the C and a swoosh around it, and that actually is that centre black section on the side of the car. It's really nicely done. And you might not always see that, but you can see where the inspirations come from. It's come from the group logo, and I like stuff like that. Andy Blackmore rubbing off, you see. I've spent so much time with Andy. I get to spot this kind of thing. Coming down the last couple of minutes, so there'll be another lap at least for that number 188. And that was that car's best lap. Well done, Mathieu. Gets down to a 2:01.6. So now within 0.4 of a second of pole position as Dan Lloyd goes back out in the Brutal Fish by KCMG machine.
Yeah, Mathieu Detry on for good things, I would say, having come out of the TCR Benelux Championship with Very Monster Autosport and raced with Team WRT as well in their TCR campaign 2007. So well used to the pocket rocket small touring car front wheel drive cars. Done some GT4 racing though as well around Europe. So silver rated and potentially a real star of the future, Mathieu Detry.
This is a real interesting entry as well. The Brutal Fish by KCMG entry. Dan Lloyd will be joined by his TCE Europe teammates Martin Rieber and Pepe Orola, and they're getting some technical assistance from JAS, who effectively are the works developers of Honda race cars in Europe, been around for a very, very long time, helped to develop the NSX GT3 car and a variety of the TCRs down through the years. The aim of the entry, they were seeing this weekend earlier on, is to be on the podium. They ran quite well with the car at Dubai, but didn't feel as though they'd got this car the way they wanted to, and it's an opportunity to just get some more seat time before the TCE European Series kicks off. Well, very much in an endurance spec this weekend. JS2R Ligier coming back out as across the line for Mathieu Detry. The Audi checkered flag comes out now, and Dan Lloyd's done a very good middle sector in that Honda. He could be going even better than his 2:01.171 at the moment. Who else has improved? Harry Hilders for NKPP Racing by Baz Cooten has just done his best sector too. That's the middle sector. Checkered flag waving, so complete this lap. Now, how is Mathieu doing? Not a bad first sector, but not great. Improvement by Yannick Metzler last time around, a 2:01.747, but he's in the fuel stop now. Into the pit lane for Daniel Lloyd after his fastest of everybody's centre sector. So he hasn't shown their full hand. I think he realises he's not under threat at the moment, and it's a provisional pole position for Brutal Fish, which in a moment's time I should be able to tell you when the 188, which is in the Ascari area of the track at the moment, comes through. That is the last car that can challenge, and the time's not suggesting that that's the case at the moment. I think we're going to see Mathieu Dutré just pull into the pit lane after going round the 11th and final corner, the long right-hander at Parabolica. Yeah, he's on the brakes a bit early there and slips over to the right-hand side. The Ligier just on an outlap, so won't improve either. They'll be delighted with that. KCMG, Dan Lloyd. Yeah, 188 coming in. We can confirm now, JP, that is a pole sitter.
Yeah, and Dan Lloyd, a real superstar in the UK in the past, having run in Porsche Carrera Cup GB, British GT, and has also, I think I'm right saying, the most recent TCR UK champion. Admittedly, that championship sort of struggled to get going, particularly that season, in terms of entry numbers, but Dan Lloyd nevertheless could only beat what was put in front of him and was champion in 2018. He's raced in the TCR Europe and Asia championships in recent years. TCR Malaysia, he's done a few races there as well for Brutal Fish this year with one win, so making a real name for himself in the TCR world, despite having raced GT3 for a number of years in the sort of mid-2010s.
That's impressive, because I know it's got a steering wheel, 4 wheels and an engine, but front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, 300 and plenty horsepower going through the front wheels. It's a different, if you'll pardon the expression, different kettle of Brutal Fish than he's been used to. But they are on pole position, the KCMG, so therefore proudly displaying the Hong Kong logos and flags on that car. Dan Lloyd doing the time. Pepe Oriola and Martin Reba, the man at the head of Brutal Fish, will be joining him. The FK7 then taking pole by just under half a second from AC in second. And it was Mathieu Dutré who did the time. Vincent Rademacher and Stefan Perrin. Welcome back, Stefan, to the paddocks again. Good to see you here. Autorama by Wolf Power, the Swiss flagged team. And it was Yannick Metzler, the Swiss driver, who did the time there. He's another 10th or so further back, and we'll have for company the Red Camel Jordan NL Cupra, which was another 10th and a half away in 4th position. John Boris Shire is the best of the TCX behind the wheel of the Nordschleifer Racing Ligier. Then it's 2 more Cupras, Top Car, Loris Pratesh in the number 131, and then NKPP Racing by Baz Cooten. It was Harry Hilders who did the time there. And further back on the 4th row, Autorama, their second car. That is the number 1 car, wearing the overall championship winning number from last year. Roberto Ferri in the Volkswagen, and then WEC Motorsports, BMW, which we didn't see too much of out there in the hands of George Haynes, is in TCX. No sign of the 211 Leon Cup racer, the second of the Autorama car for Luigi Stanco and the rest of the team. We'll try and get to the bottom of that and see whether that car is going to come out or whether they had some issues that just stopped it making the qualifying. So a nice relaxed half an hour there, JP. Everybody, getting some fast times in, but I think crucially probably just getting some lap times in and getting some more miles under the wheels.
Yeah, and it's always debatable as to how much actual setup change you can do into qualifying, bearing in mind the start of the race is, only a few hours away. And you'd speak to some people like Baz Cooten who say, well, we pretty much use race setup in qualifying. And then there are 1 or 2 other people who suggest that he and a few others are trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, because there is definitely some fine-tuning to be done to edge out, to squeeze out that extra bit of pace that is required, particularly around this circuit, which is the fastest one we'll visit all year. It's also the longest circuit we visit all year as well, at nearly 5.8 kilometres, longer than Dubai. In fact, you don't figure that Monza is a long track, but that's because you're negotiating it at such high speed. And speaking of high speed, these are the quickest cars that we'll see in the race, with the GT3s now coming out onto track. One of the first being the Wochenspiegel Team Monschau Ferrari 488, and great to have a Ferrari here in Ferrari's homeland. We didn't have one of those in Portimao with no Scuderia Praha car from the Czech Republic, and that car notably absent from this entry list this weekend as well. But great to have the Germans with their 488 here. Georg Weiss, Leonhard Weiss, Jochen Krumbach and Hendrik Still are a familiar lineup. We've got dramas already though for a Mercedes heading out of the pits, which has ground to a halt. It looks like
that's the MP racing car,
58.
Manuela Gostner. And that Evo 2020, the big grille, the wide mouth frog, that one, but it's, I'm afraid, not hopping out of the pit lane at the moment, as the GR Motorsport, the Reiter Engineering car goes out with Laura Kreheimer. And nice to see the Renault RS01 back again for Akip Verscher in a rather KCMG colour scheme.
It is
actually. So used to seeing that in a bright yellow, or we've seen them the RSs in Gulf as well colours, with Stewie Hall being involved in that. The RS01, and we've got Renault Sport here this weekend, of course. So there might be a couple of mechanics who can help them out here. But with Renault Sport running the first couple of European rounds of the Formula Renault Euro Series, code 60 very early on here. But the Mike Verscher behind the wheel of the Renault RS01. Verscher ran the cars in the original Sprint and Endurance Series for that model of car, the one make one model series that, from memory, I seem to think I think it was a Le Mans LMP2 drive as part of the prize, certainly for the pro side of it. And for the AM side, I think there was some test and something else. I did a couple of rounds of that when that was televised. That championship was curtailed at least a year early, and those cars built to a very exacting specification by Renault Sport, as the Manuela Gostner MP Racing AMG GT3 is going back to pit lane, not with AMG power, with Marshall power there. Those RSs originally had carbon brakes, very highly developed aerodynamics. They were a quick car, and of course they ran a tuned version of the Nismo GTR GT3 engine because of the tie-up between Nismo, Nissan and Renault as part of that relationship. So it wasn't short of horsepower either.
No.
And it sadly came to a rather premature end.
I'm just looking at the stats actually. Inaugural season 2015, folded 2016.
Yeah, it
ran 2 seasons.
And it was meant to run, I think, 4 seasons. I think that was the original commitment.
Yeah.
But Akip Verscher, one of the teams who did some development work in bringing that car, in inverted commas, back down to GT3 kind of pace. It's not a GT3 car. No, it's not. Of course it isn't. Because it was never built as a road car. However, a number of series, including Creventic, with a little bit of reverse development, things like steel brakes, changing of the aero, particularly the rear wing, that car was brought back, and we saw it race a couple of times at Abu Dhabi, didn't we, in the 12 hours?
Yes.
The double six, effectively, as that was. By the way, Manuela Gostner, whatever was the problem with the bright green number 58, the MP racing car, whatever ailed it has ceased to ail it, it's back out again and moving through the early part of that. And it did seem to get a decent performance balancing. I've got a feeling it did win a Creventic race overall, didn't it? Where was that?
Mugello.
It wasn't Mugello.
2016.
Well remembered. I know I wasn't there.
That's like one, sort of round 1 of your Creventic pop quiz. That
Excellent.
Always pops up, that little question. Yeah, that was a split 12-hour race, and relatively early on at Mugello. It might have been 17 actually, but certainly they took a victory. And yeah, I suppose reliability is often the Renault RS01's downfall, because it was designed to be a mini enduro car, because the longest that the Renault Sport Trophy ran was 70 minutes.
Correct. Two drivers.
On the Saturday, I think, and then you had the sprint race on the Sunday. Generally in sport, the second season was in support of the European Le Mans Series. I think that's how you ended up calling a few of those races at Estoril. So yeah, it still, I suppose, needs to just make sure that it gets to the finish, and as long as it does, then there's no question about the pace, and the balance of performance has to be carefully done, as you say, because it's not strictly a street car, and therefore when you fit it into a class that it's not naturally at home in, then you've got to make sure that it's pegged back suitably, but also has the chance of taking victory as well.
2:56.9 for that car. Well, not really. That was an outlap, so don't worry about that. Quick word of Leonard Weiss for Wochenspiegel Team Monschau in the Ferrari 488. Johnny mentioned the team earlier on. Good to see Wochenspiegel, one of the refugees from the Nürburgring Längstrecke series, which is back on track this weekend for 2 races. But Wochenspiegel committing to Hankook 24-hour series last season, wasn't it? They decided to come over and have a play. And they've been a great addition. They were running their Norma M30 yesterday in the private test. LMP3 car pounding around Monza, and ended up about 5.5 seconds or so quicker than the best of the GT3 cars, which actually was the Renault again. So that was an interesting oddity for those trackside. MDM Motorsports are here as well this weekend in one of the BMW M4 GT4s, which of course debuted in Coventry competition before even the factory were ready to let it go. They were developing that car a couple of seasons ago, and it came out at Dubai as a factory run, a BMW Motorsport run entry. Jan-Jaap van Rijn driving that car. Just one GT4 rather disappointingly. We've got 7 GT3s, a couple of GTXs, a GT4, actually 3 GTXs, a GT4 and the 2 Speed Lover Porsches. I think it was the 978 Speed Lover car. Gavin Pickering has just gone out in that car. That had a bit of a problem yesterday afternoon and had to come back on the back of a flatbed, which I caught just before the qualifying session for the Renault single-seater championship. But that car is running fine. Gav at the wheel, just going through Ascari at the moment. It's the sound of the engine you can hear behind my voice and behind Gavin's head. So you probably hear the whine of the strip-cut gearbox there more than you can the engine. The flat six being rather quiet, sitting behind Gavin at the moment. Another car to look out for in an exceptionally good-looking livery is the Valvoline KTM. This is one of the new GT4 cars, and I really like the look of this. It's listed as a GTX concept. Laura Greiheimer driving that car this morning for Writer Engineering, who are developing this car. This is a real goal by KTM to get a customer car out there, resplendent in a very famous set of colours with the red and two-tone blue Valvoline on it, and it looks to me absolutely brilliant. We've seen these cars in black, in carbon, in bright orange before, and again we saw a forerunner of this car at Barcelona last year, and I was crawling all over it because I thought it was a super thing. The car is continuing to be developed. As to whether it will become a GT2 car for that new-ish series or what it's going to be, we're not entirely certain, but it looks great. It's a full covered coupe in the style of KTM, and again they ran Barcelona last year with Laura doing a cracking opening stint, I seem to remember, in that race. And that's great to see that the manufacturer taking this form of racing seriously.
Well, Laura's become a KTM specialist in the last few years, racing with Reiter and with True Racing as well. And yeah, we're on to the next phase of KTM's development, and that looks fabulous. I mean, you take all the other cars out of the equation and a nice close-up, and it could almost be an LMP1 car.
Yes, it could.
As soon as you lose perspective of the size of the thing, it looks fabulous. It's a full-on prototype, that is. Yeah, the Valvoline colour scheme, again, another paint job that doesn't really look bad on any car, but really emphasises the light of the machine, which is great to see.
Drive-through penalty for the car collection machine. Let me see what that was for. Refueling infringement. So drive-through penalty in qualifying. Car 226 being asked to... Well, that was earlier on, wasn't it? No, that was much earlier on. So don't worry about that. Just looking at the messages and penalties on the race control screen. Thank you, as ever, to Time Service for all of the information that we get here in the booth, and to James for giving us strategy and enhanced look at the times, which will come far more into play in the longer portion of the race tomorrow, I would suggest, as we're checking to see how many laps people have done and whether there's a bit of sneaky strategy coming on. Into the pit lane, Leonard Weiss with the Ferrari 488 GT3. He's out. And did you see who that was getting in? Leonard definitely getting out, because that's his helmet. The yellow and grey helmet. We'll see when it's the orange helmet. Main time across the start-finish line. MP's 2020 version of the AMG GT3 in a very, very green, or sort of a chrome green colour scheme. Won't miss that one as well. If you're just joining us, hello, Kevin Payne at RSL_studio. Good to see the RSO1 and KTM on the track for a bit of variety. Certainly is, Kevin. And if you're just joining us, news breaking. We're watching cars here at Monza of Formula One's edition of Mugello to the 2020 season. Johnny's birthday weekend, somewhere around the 11th of September. More details of that as we can, whether that's a single race or a double header. Only 8 Formula One races so far. It's been suggested that Portimao will get at least 1 race, possibly 2. Mugello, Imola have renewed there. Formula One track grade licence as well. Whether F1 will go there, not sure, but that could be another 3. And then multiple races, we're being told, in the Arabian Gulf area, with possibly a couple of races at Abu Dhabi and maybe one at Bahrain as well. A bit of a problem at the De La Rochia chicane.
93.
That's the 3rd of the Herberth cars. Now, I haven't got that on my timing screen at the moment, interestingly enough. Let's see who that is. That's Klaus Bachler. Unusual mistake for Klaus.
I was about to say, well, that won't be Klaus Bachler, so apologies to his 2 teammates.
Yeah.
Because I was about to suggest it was either Stefan Gurig or Stefan Aust, but yeah, young Austrian driver making an uncharacteristic mistake. That's him trying to find the limits of the car into the second chicane, therefore. As long as you don't do that in the race, you'll be absolutely fine. And he has still got time on the clock, 15.5 minutes, to scrub the tyres of any dirt and pick up that he will have no doubt trodden in going around the cone there. Now the cone's deliberately placed, I think, at the second chicane, so that if you outbrake yourself, you don't come straight back onto the circuit and risk running into the side of somebody. But also, the timekeepers don't want you gaining an advantage. Speaking of which, another car's going to do exactly the same. This is from the 991 class and doesn't go round the cone.
It's Gavin Pickering. No, it's not Gavin Pickering. It's Eric Muez. Yeah,
the other
Eric
speed
Muez.
lover Porsche.
Yeah.
And I just wonder whether there is a penalty for rejoining the track in that way, because, as I say, there's a marker post within the runoff area which you're supposed to stay to the right of, a loop around that, and then that ensures that you're at an angle where it's easier to check to your left to make sure there isn't any oncoming traffic, and also it just decreases your speed, so it's more safe to join. But unfortunately, that 979 car skated right across the runoff and popped back onto the track. Let's see whether how strict the clerk of the course is going to be in that respect. Might be just that rule has to be applied during the race. Anyway, the scaled down pit lane crew for car 34, which is the car collection Audi, springing to life, and it looks like Max Edelhoff who has taken charge. I noticed that on, I've got here in my hands, Gustav Edelhoff was also down to drive the 34. Max's father, but it's probably going to be just Max from the Edelhoff family, joining Elmar Grimm and Dr. Johannes Kirchhoff. It's a full family outing though for the MP Racing Mercedes, with a total of 4 of the Gosner family involved at MP. And I think I'm right in saying that Thomas Gosner, yes, is the father of David Gosner, Karina Gosner and Manuela Gosner. So it's father, son and 2 daughters in that green 2020 spec Mercedes, joining Giorgio Serna-Giotto, who you may well know from European Le Mans Series, joining at his home race. So the Gosner family, well, Thomas is an Italian. They're all Italians, despite the German-sounding surname, from Bolzano in Italy, and obviously Giorgio Serna-Giotto, proper Italian name that.
Max Edelhoff. And they've had some problems with that 34 car collection Audi, haven't they? Because they got a drive-through for some fueling infringements. I wonder if they were fueling in the pit lane where they weren't meant to be, because that car hasn't got a meaningful lap time yet. And just going on to a flyer now, still shown on my timing screen on the out lap, as we're down to just 12.5 minutes to go. In fact, just under that at the moment. Still that time. No, not actually still that time. Klaus Bachler, having had his moment, now at the top of the timing screens, 149.359, just 2 cars under 150. Klaus Bachler and the now in the pit, Akib Fischer RS41 Renault. So Bachler now to the top for Herbeth number 93.
Yeah, and that's more as I expect from the 28-year-old Austrian, I have to say. I know he's surprised a number of people at Portimao in last year's race, those that hadn't quite discovered him in, well, World Endurance Championship and the European Le Mans Series as well. Starting off Engineer Perfetti's career nicely in Motorsport when he was co-driver to Didier in the very first year of what was then the GT3 Le Mans Cup. They turned up in a brand new spec 991 Porsche at Imola, and yeah, Klaus, what would he have been then? Early 20s, now nearing 30 these days, and so much GT experience across the board at both GTE and GT3 level.
Very impressed at the times that are being put in by the GT4 car. Right, sitting down in 12th out of 13th at the moment, but Jan-Jaap van Rijn doing a decent job, 2:02.2, and it's a mark of just how close things are ahead of him, that he isn't further up the field, to be honest. The GT3's very tightly packed, so it's 6 GT3s, then 2 GTXs, then the 2 991 Speed Lover cars, then the third of the GTXs, then the GT4, and then the final GT3 car, that Max Edelhoff machine. I don't know what's going on with that. Maybe they've got a timing issue on Max's car. Well, they've just been given another penalty, drive-through penalty, 2 times. Seen Team Portal for details. Exceeding 93, exceeding track limits. Lap time disallowed. So does that mean we're going to see that provisional pole time disappear? Could do. Oops, on the wrong one. Klaus Bachler at the moment is in fuel, 148.9. And yeah, that's been taken out. I think. No, best time still there. Right. There are a few places here, JP, where you can take a bit of a lead. BMW just going through there in its black and red colour scheme, so we get to see a look at the GT4 car. Jan-Jaap van Rijn, MDM Motorsports. Great to hear the flat shifting on some of the cars out there, including the Renault 91 coming down to the second chicane now Here's the Herbert second place car, Robert Renard. Now, we won't know, of course, how the Renards are going to be driving. The 93 in the light blue, red and orange with the Carrera model livery on that car. And that is now in the pits for Klaus Bachler, so no improvement for Klaus. Still sitting on top of the pile though, with just 8.5 minutes to go. Klaus walks away from the car. So, may suggest, JP, that that number 93 is not doing any more work.
Yeah, possibly not. In a great position at the moment then, in that almost Golf-esque livery.
Yeah.
It's not, but it's got the right sort of colours in vaguely the right positions for Preco Herbert Motorsport. Then turning up with 3 Porsches this weekend. I'm not sure whether they own all 3 of them or whether one's been rented in. But got John and I very puzzled indeed when one turned up at Portimao with the Channel 7 logo on the side as well. But I think that was a former Alabama Motorsport car.
Certainly one that Earl had added his name to at some stage, that team's name to, because of course Will drove at Dubai in an EBM
that's right.
car,
I think
and we think that's where it came from.
Yeah, that was the Jürgen Haring car, wasn't it? And yeah, Will drove one of the Herbert cars, or has subsequently become a Herbert car at Dubai. Kiwi racing in the Middle East, bringing home sponsors with him. Yeah, on version 2 of the final entry list, the revised final entry list as it's titled, Alfred Renauer down to drive both the 91 and the 92, whereas Robert Renauer just the 91. So they've sort of split the twin brothers, but Alfred's still presumably going to have a bit of time in the 91 as well. So the usual lineup found once again in the 91 car of Daniel Alleman, Ralph Bone and both R and A Renauer. And with Alfred sharing his time with the 92 of Taki Constantinou and Jürgen Haring, guy I've just mentioned. Klaus Bachler, fastest so far in the session, although staring up to John's timing screen.
I know, that one there.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
It's now out of date.
Yeah.
I'll stick to my one as well. She's got another three. And yeah, Klaus, I mean, could have given him more. You probably mentioned there was an absolute best on the in-lap in sector 1, but he decided to back out of it, maybe hit a bit of traffic, and after 5 laps completed, still sits there with a 1:48.9. That's 0.3 of a second quicker then than Mike Verschuur's Equipe Verschuur time for the Renault RS01. So a Porsche and Renault front row as things stand, but Robert Renauer is now out in the 91 car, out on track that is, in his Herbert Motorsport car, and expected across the line at the moment now, and he's actually into the fueling area, interestingly. So it's coming into the pits and straight for fuel. And obviously realised that it wasn't going to improve on that particular lap. One car that does, though, is Alfred Renauer in the 92. So he gains a spot to 5th, jumping ahead of at least Hendrik Still's Wochenspiegel team Monza Ferrari, which is in the pit lane. So no chance for him to respond. Still got 5 minutes left on the clock. If you sent your car now from the pits, you would get round, I think, just about in time. Yes, before the checkered flag, and that's the crucial thing.
Might get 2 laps.
You might get 2 laps if you don't hang around. Certainly, just need to start the final lap as the clock hits 0 to ensure that your lap counts, of course, and therefore may extend the session by a further couple of minutes. So plenty of time left, but the 93 knows that it's done vaguely enough, I think good enough for the front row, having a 0.6 of a second cushion.
Paul Truswell, hello Paul, good morning, welcome to the broadcast. He exerts influence from the Woking Data Centre.
I've always said that.
Yeah. He has cleared up the Klaus Bachler disallowed time. It was his lap 3, which was a 1:49.3. He then improved, Bachler did, to a 1:48.9 without exceeding track limits, which is the time that has put him on the pole, provisional pole, as it still is for the moment.
Very good time from Mike Mashur at the end of that lap. He's gone quicker through sector 3 than anyone else has managed in the session. And he did improve his overall lap time, actually, 1:49.129. So that cuts the gap to just 0.2 of a second now to Klaus Bachler's effort. Was 3, now down to 2. Can he get it even closer with possibly 2 laps left for that Renault RS01? Porsche, Renault, Porsche, Audi. Porsche again with a Ferrari joining that car on the 3rd row from Wolkenspiegel, which is back into the session. Giorgio Sernagiotto driving the Costner MP Racing Mercedes. I'm going to call it that because there's 4 family members of Costner in that 5-driver lineup. But Giorgio Sernagiotto, a regular with Villorba Corsa, and their exploits at the 24 Hours of Le Mans and European Le Mans Series, GT4 Europe as well. Villorba Corsa, well-known squad. Sernagiotto though, racing the Mercedes GT3 car. Certainly his first experience of the new facelifted version of the Mercedes AMG, and that car now up to 5th place in his hands, so he's gone quicker than Alfred Renauer to jump from one side of the grid on row 3 to the other. Hedrick still in the 22 Ferrari, relegated to the 4th row. Stefan Rossi now gains a place in the KTM GTX concept, amazingly looking car in the Valvoline livery.
Watching these cars around the park here at Monza, it's almost unthinkable that Creventic haven't been here before, but they haven't. It just looks and feels and sounds and smells so right, but they haven't been here before. And of course, there are very, very strict noise limits of how many days they can have here. And it's popular, it's famous, its history goes back to 1922. You can kind of understand why Creventic haven't been here before. But like I say, maybe it was because we did the iRacing version, but they all look so right here.
They do. I suppose Creventic are very experienced at Imola, which aesthetically is a similar track, right in the town. Little bit of, well, very much a parkland circuit again at Imola, and it's amazing every time I go to Imola. I think there's so much life that goes on inside the circuit as well, and the same can be said here at Monza too, because some people just come here for a walk, don't even realise it's a racetrack around the outside of somewhere where they've maybe gone for their daily exercise. And it's the same at Imola as well. I mean, there's a tennis court, there's even a school, I think, on the inside of that track. It's also fairly similar to Mugello as well, landscape-wise. I realise Mugello's a bit more out in the countryside, but Creventic are no strangers to Italy. They've just never been to Monza before. And, we're well used to seeing all sorts of different cars around this particular circuit, but it's a very natural marriage, isn't it? We're going to get used to this quickly. Let's hope that they can find a regular home here. It's almost a shame that Italy's got so many great tracks, because you can't visit them all in one season, although Creventic are going to visit 2 of them in 2020. Which is better than I thought was going to be the case just a few months ago.
Quick note about, I know a lot of people who are into motor racing like their aircraft as well, and thanks to Brodie who's brought this to my attention. This is the NHS Spitfire from the family-owned aircraft restoration company. 80,000 names to be put onto what is quite a famous blue Spitfire. NHS charities, money being raised because they'd like to say thanks to the NHS. A £10 minimum just donation on Just Giving. I've just tweeted on that Specutainment, I've just tweeted the link to that. There's room for 80,000 names, and the donation windows closes in September, and that plane will be flying around the UK. And the idea is, whether it's a family member, a close friend, supportive neighbour, or somebody in the NHS that's looked after you, you can say thank you for their support through the current COVID-19 pandemic, for whatever they've done to help out by nominating their name to be written on the Spitfire. And as you do that, you'll raise money for all the incredible people working and volunteering within the NHS. Just fired that out on Specutainment. I don't normally retweet things like that, but that is one that's touched my heart. We've had some brush with the national health in a good way. The outcome that we would have liked with a couple of family members over this difficult time for so many people around the world. And they have been doing an extraordinary job. Have a quick look at that. I'll go to Just Giving and find the NHS Spitfire page. Checkered flag is out. So that looks to me very much like we can do a virtual elbow bump for Akip Verscheur and Mike Verscheur.
Very late on, but yeah, he managed to jump ahead of Klaus Bachler in the Renault RS01, so mightily impressive from Akip Verscheur. Done on the final lap.
Wow.
148.821. I need to interrogate his sector times to find out exactly how he managed to do that. But Klaus Bachler was the superstar through the first sector. I mentioned that Verscheur had gone quickly through the final sector, and it might be that, you know, when you're not running with anybody else, i.e. you haven't got a tow down the back straight and into the Parabolica, just that natural svelte shape of the Renault is favourable over the Porsche. I mean, Porsche, you know, clearly very aerodynamically advantageous, but not quite as low slung as the RS01. So, and even if he did have a car directly in front of him, that extra bit of mile per hour, kilometre per hour, might well have helped coming out of turns 8, 9 and 10. But Mike Verscheur getting pole position then. It will have been a long time since we last saw a Renault RS01. I'll dig back through the archives to find that out.
As you do that, I'll have a look at the times and therefore the grid for the first 4 hours of the race, which will start today, later on this afternoon at Monza, just coming up to 20 minutes before 1 o'clock as the pole sitting car comes back to its team in its blue, black and white livery. Team opening the gull wing door. Mike Verscheur gets out of the car. Very bright orange and blue helmet. They're all masked up down there, so have to be socially distanced. Big thumbs up from Mike. There are penalties that can be applied if the COVID protocols aren't being looked at. And Mike with his helmet on going back to the rest of the team. The team are very happy indeed about that. So let's just the results for you. Verscheur then in a time of 1:48.8, just 0.119 of a second ahead of Klaus Bachler in the 93. That's the Herberth Porsche. First the Herberth Porsche. Second is on the inside of row 2, Robert Renau with a 49.5. Also on a 49.9, Max Edelhoff. After problems early on for the car collection car and a couple of drive-through penalties, they finish on the outside of row 2. Then it's Giorgio Sernagiotto for MP Racing, the number 58 car. That was the car again that had a bit of a stutter early on, wasn't it? With Manuela Gosner at the wheel of it. Then Alfred Renard on the outside of row 3 in the 92. He's on a 150.5. These are all GT3 class cars. Hendrik Still in the number 22. Wochenspiegel, Team Monschau Ferrari. Again, his best lap was his last lap. 150.6. That's good enough for 7th. Stefan Racina is the first of the GTX cars. That's the Reiter Engineering KTM ahead of the ARC Bratislava. That's Miro Konopka. And they are in 8th and 9th. Gavin Pickering is the best of the 991 Speed Lover cars. He's in 10th position. And his teammate is Oliver Dons, finished 1 place behind him. Then Ruud Ulch in the GR Motorsport and the MDM GT4. Tim Coronel took that car at the end. That's your 13. Earlier on, we had the TCE qualifying, which was headed and therefore starting on pole position. The Brutal Fish by KCMG Honda will start there. No major dramas, JP. That's good news. The weather looks good, and that means we're good to go for a decent race.
And I'm pretty sure that's a first for Creventic Championship Racing. A Renault on pole position. Never had that before. I wonder whether there might be one somewhere in the middle of 2016, but no, there was a race win at Mugello, but Renault RS01 has yet to start from the front row. So a bit of history in a historic year already for Creventic Racing, powered by Hankook, the 12 hours of Monza. Plenty happened, though, across 2 half-hour sessions.
A Renault and a Honda on the pole position for the first part of the Hankook 12 Hours of Monza 2020, part of the Hankook 24 Hours series. 20 minutes before 3 CET is when we're back on air. An hour before that if you are watching and listening in the UK. Thanks to Johnny Palmer. I'm John Hindorf. Tim Gray was up in London, and the 021 team were cutting the pictures and getting us to the world from their OB truck in the paddock at Monza. We've got some Formula Renault racing to come, so don't go too far away. Thanks for joining us. We'll have part 1, the first 4 hours, the 12 hours of Monza later on today.